In this video, we're going to be talking about how to get the best sounding drums for reggae. Let's get into it. Reggae is my absolute favorite genre to mix, produce, create, and write to. I've been learning and writing reggae music for the past 9 years. The thing that took the longest to develop was getting a good drum sound for reggae. Reggae isn't really like rock or country or pop music. Well, I guess you could say it's a little like pop music as far as how the drums sound, because reggae is very drum and bass oriented. It has very specific nuances and details that other musicians that have never played reggae won't really understand until they actually learn how to do it. So for what you all came here for, here is how I got my developed sound when recording reggae drums. So number one is the actual drums. You could have, honestly, any drum set. It could be a cheap kit, it could be a really expensive kit. It all depends on the tuning and the heads. What I did was I bought a used Orange County drums and percussion 4-piece kit, and then I expanded it with a Pearl rack tom, so now it's a 5-piece. This is also optional, but a timbali is super crucial in reggae as well. Not everybody does it this way, and some people say you shouldn't do it, but I took the resonant heads off of my drum kit. It's kind of hard to explain the exact sound and characteristics that taking the resonant heads off gives it, but it seems to kind of give it a more controlled, like thuddy sound. I don't know how to explain it other than I've watched a bunch of videos on people taking the resonant heads off, and I did it and I like how it sounds. So the resonant heads are taken off of the toms, the kick drum, and obviously the timbali. The snare drums have the resonant heads on them still. So there's two different snares that I have. One of them is my 1-drop snare, and the top and the bottom head are tuned as high as possible to give it that really high pitched sound, and also get a really loud and very prominent 1-drop. My other snare is a steel snare, and it is a coated Remo Ambassador. And the way that I tuned it was so that when you're hitting the snare drum and you look on a frequency graph, it shows that it's hitting between like 170 to like 210, 220 hertz as the fundamental, which is the bell curve, the peak. The resonant head is tuned really high and the snare wires are super tight. For both snare drums, I'm using dampening to get rid of any resonance. You want your drums to sound nice and tight with reggae. You don't want too much resonance. Unless you're doing a 1-drop and you're doing some snare fills, it's nice to have some of that resonance in there. For the toms, I'm using Remo pinstripes, and for the kick drum, I'm actually using an Evans EMAD. I know that tuning is a really important part, but I'm not gonna go too in depth with it because I don't have any spare drums lying around that I can show you guys how I tuned it. All you need to know is when you put your fresh head on and you start tuning it, you want to tune it in a circle. A lot of people say do the star, but I did the circle because I saw this one video of this guy. He said to tune it until on each side until the wrinkles go away. I can link that video down below, and any other video on tuning your drums specifically for reggae, the videos that I learned from. One thing I forgot to mention, for the toms, you want to put a lot of dampening on it, because if you don't, it's gonna have a lot of sustain and resonance and it's not gonna sound good. I use the jellies to dampen my toms. Some people use rings, some people use wallets, whatever, but I use the jellies, and you just keep putting them on until when you hit it, the sound isn't completely dry and completely choked, but it's also not resonating too much. As far as cymbals go, you don't want really choked cymbals. You want fast, thin crashes. Usually rides are not used in reggae. I recommend any fast crash from like 16 to 19 inches. If they make 19 inches, I don't even know. I have a 17-inch Sabian fast, thin crash, and then I have an 18-inch Zildjian, a custom fast, thin crash. I love them both. Okay, so let's go on to mic placement. I can't really talk about how I mic my kick drum. I can't demonstrate because the way that my kick drum is set up back there, I would have to pull my whole kit out to show you guys. So here's a few pictures that kind of demonstrate how I mic'd it. I'm using an AKG D112, and it's placed directly in the center of the kick drum, and then I'm using a sub kick for my kick out. For all my toms, I'm using Audix mics, and they're mic'd directly under the drum. Usually you see drums mic'd on top of the batter head of the tom, but I have it mic'd under where the resonant head will go. For rack toms 1 and 2, I'm using an Audix D2, and then for my floor tom, I'm using a Audix D4. For the hi-hat, I'm just using an Audix i5 pointed perpendicular down at the hi-hats. And then for the snares, I'm also using i5s for the top and bottom. And for the timbali, I'm using a trusty Shure SM57. The overheads are up to you. You can use small diaphragm condenser mics or you can use large diaphragm. The most important thing that I've found is making sure that each overhead mic is equidistant from the snare drum. I know that there's a lot of other miking techniques you can do, but this is what I found that works best for me. For the overheads, I'm using 2 AKG 414s. All right, that's basically a rundown of my kit as a whole. Now let's talk about preamps. You can totally 100% get away with recording your drums on a cheaper audio interface like a Focusrite 18i20, but one thing I have noticed, and I say this in all of my videos, is once I upgraded my preamps to really high-end mic pre's, my drum sound changed drastically. I know buying really high-end mic pre's isn't really the budget-friendly option, but I'm just being transparent with you guys so y'all know that there is actually a difference. For the kick-in mic, I'm using an API 512C. For the snare top, I'm using an API 512C. And then my overheads, I'm running those through my SSL6 channel. For toms 1, 2, and 3, I'm using the Camden 500 series mic pre's. And then the timbali, I'm going to be using my Neve 511 mic pre. For the sub kick, I'm using my Stam Audio 1073 Neve clone. For my snare bottom, I'm running that into the second channel of the Neve clone. And then my hi-hats are going into my Golden 58 tube pre by Audioscape. All right, last but not least, acoustic treatment. To each his own on this, but most reggae drums are recorded in dead rooms. I mean dead rooms as in a small room with a lot of treatment. You want your drums to be clean, prevalent, and super punchy since reggae is such a drum and bass oriented genre. Other genres like rock and country use a lot of room coloration on their drums, but for reggae, you want it to stay nice and tight. Alright guys, so we're in the session. I created a nice little reggae rhythm so we can hear how the drums sound raw and how they sound processed, and then I'm going to work through and show you guys how I got to where I got. Alright, so we're going to start out with the raw drums. Here we go. Okay, cool. So now we're going to listen to what the process drums sound like. Big difference. I'm going to go through each drum one by one and solo them and show you guys what I did as far as processing goes. So we're going to solo the snare top first. And the first thing I did was I gated the snare. Beginning. That's without the gate. Here's with the gate. So the gate just kind of gets rid of a little bit of bleed from the hi-hats, the toms, the kick. There's a little bit going on in there that it's kind of hard to get rid of, but I dialed it in as much as I could. And let's look at the EQ we have going on here. So I did not do too much. I used the Lindell 80 plugin. It's the only plugin I used on the snare. Let's listen to it. So you'll see that I boosted a lot of the gain on these. That's just kind of to match with what the keys and the organ were doing, just to make sure everything is optimal level. So I used this instead of using clip gain. And I did a 5 dB boost of 10K. See what it sounds like without it. Here's with it. Just a little more clarity. And then the high mids, I did 4.8K, 7 dB. See what it sounds without that. That's carrying most of the weight as far as EQ goes, I think. Yeah. Let's go back. That's off. That's on. And then I just high passed at 70. I didn't add any low end or anything like that. I thought that it sounded good right out the gate. And as you can see, there's a little bit of compression. About -3, -3.5 decibels of gain reduction. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the kick drum. So I use a sub kick as well, but the sub kick's turned down pretty low. So the kick, I also used a gate. Okay, here's without the gate. With the gate. Without. And with. Just gets a little bit of that extra noise out of it, just like the snare drum. Okay, so I added a little more to the kick drum as far as processing goes. Let's look at the EQ. Start it all over. Okay, so I didn't high pass this. Same thing, boosted about 5 dB of gain. Okay, let's start at the high end. I boosted at 10K. See how it sounds without. Here is with it. Huge difference. And also I boosted 6.72 dB of 3.2. 3.2K for my kick drum is a good range to get that clicky noise out of the kick and give it more clarity. So let's see how that sounds without. It doesn't sound bad. The snare and the kick drum work together as far as the one drop goes. So I want them both to work together really well. And I feel that boosting the top end of the kick drum makes the snare side stick and the kick blend together super well. So here, again, here's without 3.2K. And here's with. Without. With. So that's how that sounds. And here is 3 dB, or yeah, I would say 4 dB of 60 hertz. That's with. Here's without. Here's with. -1.5 dB of gain reduction. Nothing too crazy on this. I do a lot of my compression on the drum bus, which I'll get to. Let's listen to how the snare and the kick drum sound together. Yeah. Yeah, they just work together super well. It's really important when you're doing a one drop for the kick to be super fat and prevalent and the snare drum to be very clear. Just everything needs to be punchy and clear, I guess, is the best way to describe it. I don't know how to describe it other than it's kind of a feeling thing too. On the kick in, I use this sub filter, so let's see how it sounds without it. That's without the sub filter. Here's with it. That's with. Here's without. Okay, so let's move on to my overheads. I don't do too much of the overheads. I use the Lindell. I use the Lindell for everything. Same thing, boosted about 6 dB of gain. Boosted like 3 dB of 10K. Nothing on the mids. I high passed at 160 to get rid of any like boxiness or any low frequencies that don't need to be there because the kick is handling all of that. A little bit of compression, minus 3 dB, because those cymbals can kind of get out of hand sometimes. Let's see how it sounds with the kick and the snare top. Let's hear what it sounds without the overheads. That's with. All right, let's see how the toms sound. I'm gonna go to a section where there are multiple toms happening. I didn't gate the toms, I actually did tom cuts. I usually do that for all of my drum recordings because the gate sometimes just does not do it for me. I like getting rid of everything I can and isolating the toms as much as possible. So let's see what I did EQ wise. Okay, so I did 7 dB of 10K. Let's see how that sounds without it. Okay, with it. Just a little more clarity so they cut through the mix. And 3.2 on the tom as well. 3.2K in the high mids. So we'll see how it sounds without. With. Oh, sorry. With. And then I boosted at 220. That's where the fundamental is. See how that sounds? Without it. Yeah, it's too thin without those low mids. So here's with 220 hertz. And I didn't high pass. I don't know why. Okay, that sounds better. And same thing on the gain, about 3 dB. And I did a lot of gain reduction on this one. Yeah, it's probably gonna get to about 5, minus 5 dB. Yeah, about 4 dB gain reduction. And let's go over to, and I basically did the same thing on tom 2 as well. Yep, almost the same exact settings on tom 2. So just refer to the tom 1 settings. Gain reduction about the same. Yep. Okay, tom 3. roughly the same thing since the Tom 3 is a little lower. No, yeah, it's roughly the same. I high passed at 45 because I like the sub frequencies that the Tom gives off. Okay, let's find where that guy went. Right here. Yep. Here's without all the EQ. Here's with. Without the high pass. With the high pass. Oop. With the high pass. Same thing on the compression. That's it for the toms. Let's go over to the hi-hats. I boosted about 10K. For the high mids, I got rid of a lot of that 700 because there's a lot of like boxy, just high mids that I don't want in there. They just don't sound very good. So here's how they sound without it. And here's without the 700 hertz. Here's without it. And I high passed at 360, got rid of any low end so that the hi-hat is just handling a lot of the high mids and high frequencies. And I actually recorded the hi-hat kind of hot, so I didn't boost it that much, but I have a lot of compression going on in the hi-hat as well, as you can see. Yeah, just so everything is nice and balanced. I want my hi-hats to be pretty balanced. Okay, now let's jump into the timbali. So the timbali, let's see how that sounds. Okay, so the timbali, I boosted about 10K, and I found that a good area where kind of the fundamental high frequency is of the timbali is about 5 dB gain on 1.6 kilohertz. Then I high passed at 160, didn't boost it at all because I also recorded that pretty hot. And then about -2, -3 dB gain reduction. Okay, so now let's move on to what I did as far as effects goes. I use a plate reverb right here and a spring reverb on the snare drum. So let's solo the snare because I'm sure you heard that all throughout me showing this. I should have showed it from the beginning, but so this is without any processing. This is without any processing. Here's with the spring reverb. And here is with the plate reverb. Yeah, I didn't add any reverb to the kick drum. I didn't add any reverb to the overheads. I added only a little bit on the hi-hats, nothing major. Let's see how those sound with it. That's without. That's with. Very subtle. Okay, and then the toms, I wanted to give the toms a little reverb to them, so I added a little bit of spring reverb to the toms. Yeah, you can hear it a little bit. Yeah, and here's without the reverb. And here's with it again. Turn those on. Sounds good. Just a little bit of reverb on them. And the timbali has the plate and the spring as well. So let's see how that sounds. Okay, cool. Let's see how it sounds without. Okay, with again. That is about it as far as reverb goes. Okay, so let's move on to the actual drum bus. So what I use for the drum bus is a SSL by Brainworks. This is a Plugin Alliance plugin. I absolutely love this thing. I have the ratio to 4:1, slow attack, super fast release, and I dialed the threshold to my liking. Let's see how it sounds. Here's without it. Yeah, it just kind of glues everything together, and there's about -4 dB of gain reduction, and I think it sounds great on these drums. I use this thing for my vocals, I use it for the drum bus, I use it for a lot of different things. But yeah, let's see how it sounds one more time. Here's without. Sounds amazing. Okay, so let's listen to it again with the track so you guys can hear everything together. I don't know how else to say it. I'm super pumped that these drums sound as good as they do. And the reason I am pumped is because it took me so long to get this sound developed. The drum samples were just not cutting it for me. I hope this video was helpful. Please smash the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell, all that good stuff you guys already know. Let me know in the comments if you guys want to see more reggae recording tutorials or any other topic you'd like me to address. Thank y'all so much for watching. You guys have an amazing one. Peace out.